The studio behind the Until Dawn remake that's coming in October is already facing layoffs ahead of the launch of the game. They have laid off an undisclosed number of developers before the game's launch on October 4th. The developers are yet to make an official statement on the layoffs, but several developers on LinkedIn have reported on the layoffs. Stuart Campbell, a game programmer at Ballistic Moon, said, "Hi everyone, unfortunately my current role at Ballistic Moon is being made redundant, so I'm looking for new opportunities. If you have any roles you think I might be suited for, please get in touch." Cassie Cornish, a junior game designer at the studio, said, "Like many others in this wonderful but turbulent industry, I am sadly being made redundant from my role as a junior game designer at Ballistic Moon. The team have been wonderful, and I'm so excited for our game to release in October." Harry Williams, technical designer, said, "After 2 exciting years working on the wonderful Until Dawn 2024 at Ballistic Moon, I am unfortunately being made redundant as a technical designer. I've loved working with everyone at BM, and hope I cross paths with members of that family in future projects." At the time of writing, 5 devs at the studio have reported that they have been laid off at Ballistic Moon on LinkedIn. Still, it's currently unclear how many employees were affected. They reached out to the devs at for comment, and it's yet another instance of layoffs within the games industry. It's currently unclear if the round of layoffs will affect Until Dawn Remake or any other Until Dawn projects, including the film adaptation from PlayStation Productions and Sony Screen Games, or Gems, which is believed to be in early production. I mean, it's wild that they're already laying people off and it hasn't even launched yet. But I think it's a reflection of a broader approach within a lot of corporations right now, which is, hey, our expenses are too high, spending is down. So to keep the equation in balance, you got to cut staff. And even if your game hasn't launched yet, that's what we got to do. And it's stupid. It shouldn't work that way. You should at least get your game put out. And if it does well, you'd think you'd be rewarded, but that's not a given anymore. And I think that it's something that I fear is going to affect the industry long term, where passion, like games are an art form, and it is a business, certainly. But there's passion and care that goes into these things. People pour their hearts and souls into them. And when you create an environment where people cannot do their best work, where people feel as though doing their best work could lead to them just getting punished by layoffs anyways, I just think it's very hard to have a studio doing their best work and pouring their heart and soul into stuff. You're going to end up with more games that are just put together by people who are doing their best, but are just broken and crestfallen, you know? And I just don't think you can have a really healthy development environment working on these projects when everybody is just mortified that at any moment they could lose their job. You know, it's just really, really frustrating. But it's also a reaction that I think is being made by these businesses that is born out of a reasonable evaluation. Like, most of these studios are way too big and are pumping out projects that were never going to return on the investment where they needed to. And as a result, like, the games are going to lose money, you know, and that's, I would argue, because of the executives. I think it's a problem with a lot of short-sighted executives where they have this approach where they think that everything is going to stay fairly consistent, especially in the gaming space, where if the games industry is growing at a certain rate, so this is like time, and then this is like dollars spend, yay. Okay. Back in like 2000, back here, maybe dollar spend was really low. And over time, it started to tick up, and spending is going up and up and up and up. And a lot of these executives, you know, along the time, right here, they might greenlight a project that's going to cost $100 million, but they are like, okay, well, it's going to launch all the way out over here. And so by the time it launches, we should be able to cover the cost, given that spending will be more. So if we initially back launching it here in like 2005, we could expect to maybe make $60-70 million on it. By the time we hit launch, we think that spending will be higher and people will be buying it more. And so we could expect to maybe make $120 million on it. So we can greenlight a project that's bigger with a bigger budget. And this is generally how a lot of this stuff works, because you're not budgeting based on what you think the game will perform at now. You're budgeting it based off what you think it'll perform when it eventually launches 4, 5, 6, 7 years in the future, which is why you get these projects that are greenlit with massive, massive budgets. But the problem is a lot of these executives just looked at this green line and didn't run a lot of the numbers on precisely why that was growing, because of a fundamental misunderstanding of what's happening. And this is something that I've seen in the interviews with a lot of these executives when they go on MSNBC and talk about it, when they go on Bloomberg and talk about it. You can watch these interviews for yourself. And the fundamental misunderstanding that a lot of these game company CEOs and executives have made is as follows. They think that live service spend, microtransaction spend, mobile game spend, all of that is basically hand in hand with more traditional spending, like console gamer spending or PC gamer spending, which is just not the case. PC gamers, for example, are way, way, way less likely to spend $5 a day for the latest pack to open up a bunch of cards for this mobile game they're playing or this Steam game they're playing. They're very, very unlikely to do it. Some people do, sure, but it's way less likely than somebody that plays Monopoly Go on mobile, right? So mobile game spending may be skyrocketing, but that doesn't mean that console gamers will be doing the same thing. And what's happened is people like Jim Ryan, they looked at these charts and they're like, oh, spending's going up and up and up. Let's greenlight a project like Concord. Let's greenlight a project like Suicide Squad. Let's do that and build it around this microtransaction system and this live service system. And when it launches over here, yes, we might initially think, oh, performance will be here. Okay. But we're going to make up all the difference with that extra microtransaction spend. That's what we're going to do. But what they just fundamentally misunderstood is that the console gamers, the PC gamers that are interested in these games aren't going to just go along with the live service transition because they're fundamentally different games. And more than anything, console gamers and PC gamers, microtransactions and live service offerings have a stink to them. You know, for a lot of gamers, the words live service is anathema. It's toxic. It's something they don't want to mess with. It turns them off. And you saw that in real time with the announcement of Concord, where they show off this cinematic trailer that's very Guardians of the Galaxy. It's kind of interesting. And people were like, okay, I'm paying attention. Okay. And then they get the game's directors up on screen and they say, Concord is a 5v5 hero shooter set in and immediately people are turning it off. It's like, okay, so it's a 5v5 hero shooter. It's a live service. I'm out. I'm good. It's actively turning them off now because people and gamers in general, like they're able to see that from a mile away. And when a game has been built to milk them dry of all of their cash, shocker, they don't like it. The game could actually be really good, but the perception is this game has been built from the ground up just to milk me for everything I'm worth. And I don't want to be milked for everything I'm worth. I'm good. I'm good. I don't need it. So I'm not going to buy your game. I'm not going to play with it. I'm not going to mess with it. And it's the huge miscalculation where these studios and executives thought if we build live service games and games built around just driving tons and tons of microtransactions, we will see those PC gamers start to spend on a similar level as everybody else. So we'll make that money. But it did the opposite. PC gamers heard about this and it actively turned them off. And so those gamers were willing to spend even less and less. And that's what we've seen with Concord is that gamers are way less likely to spend money on live service games. And so you end up with them only selling 25,000 copies, even though they thought they'd be up here. They thought gamers were going to eat it up, but the sentiment has changed. I don't think it's really changed. I think this was always where it was going to go. Even back in like 2017, shortly after a project like Concord was initially starting to be worked on, there was the debacle with like Battlefront 2 with the loot box scandal where Disney had to step in and basically tell them, stop it, get your act together. Like, what are you doing? And other games like Shadow of War also went and basically imploded because of the end game with all the crazy loot boxes and stuff. So I don't think this was really a mystery. I think that they just had $ glasses on and they sort of self-deceived themselves, which I guess is redundant. They deceived themselves and tricked themselves into thinking that this type of thing was going to happen. But it's going to take a while because there's at least a half dozen other, huge live service games. I think it's up to a dozen actually. Live service games that are in the works over at PlayStation that they're actively working on. Those are gonna probably see the light of day. I think we will see Fair Games launch. And when that happens, I think it's going to, of course, be met with a similar response. And it's going to be another instance of a game launching, losing tons of money, and it's just going to be, you know, the live service trend. And you might occasionally get one that pops off like a Helldivers, but then it's going to just drop right back down. Because PlayStation gamers are like PC gamers in large part. They just don't want to mess with that stuff. They're good. They just don't want to deal with it. So they just don't. And we saw that with Concord. They just didn't buy it. They're like, I'm good. And then Sony's going to be really baffled. And they're going to be like, I don't understand. We spent so much money on this. Why don't you like it? Why don't you like it? I think you'd like it. It's going to get worse before it gets better. A lot of people who think like, okay, after Concord, that's going to be the pivot point. They're going to move forward. They're not going to do this anymore. Nope. They've got a lot more projects in the works. They're going to get all of them flushed out. Some will just be canceled, I'm sure. Some that you've never heard of will never see the light of day. Others are going to flush out. And some have been canceled already. I think initially it was, I think you're right, Orem. I think initially it was 12 were in the works. And then they canceled a handful, including like the Last of Us Online project and a few others we never heard of. And so they still have a handful that are going to either be canceled or they're going to release and just shove out the door. But time will tell how those turn out. MJR Payne 97, thank you for the super chat. Do you think that the only way for things to get better, more meaningful consequence have to happen to executives and managerial roles in corporate America? If so, how? I think the problem is that the only way that you see a change to corporate structures happen is if the people that are in charge make that decision. And guess who makes that decision? The managers in those corporate positions of power, and they're not going to make a decision that hurts themselves. So the only other way you see it is if like executives or rather investors step up and demand like full house clearings of dysfunctional companies, but that's pretty rare. What's more common is for them to be like bought out. So like if Warner Brothers Discovery was bought out by a separate conglomerate, like I don't even know who, but if they were bought out by somebody and then that company came in and basically cleared house of all of their management, and presuming the company that bought them out was more capable than Warner Brothers, then maybe you could see it improve. But I don't really see a mechanism for it to be fixed, because the only ones that could fix it would be the ones that need to be fixed. And I don't think, honestly, they probably don't see anything wrong with what's going on right now. They probably see everything is working totally fine. Yeah, we wish we'd had more successful projects, but hey, in the case of Zaslav, I'm still worth $400 million. Oh, well, I won't be able to buy that yacht this year. Next year I will, but this year I guess I won't. But the other thing about executives, and this is perhaps the saving grace to this, which is why it's not like just a total bummer. The one thing about executives in these big corporations is that they only really care about money at the end of the day. And if projects that are super dysfunctional and toxic and stupid are dying and losing lots of money, they will stop making them because they will lose lots of money. It will take time because they release one that fails and then they greenlight a different one that they quote unquote learned from. That'll take 5-6 years before you see it. But when you do see it, it's going to be a lot better. And so at the end of the day, you have the ultimate ability to actually make the change, which is just simply to vote with your wallet. You just don't buy it. I know it's easy to like hate play these games. I get it, but just don't. Just don't. I make videos on these sort of as like a public service thing because I can show people you're not missing out on anything. Do as I say, not as I do. I bought the game so I can make the video on it, and you don't need to buy it. And I think a lot of people get that. I mean, obviously, like I bought Suicide Squad, I bought Concord to play them for those videos, and that didn't somehow save the game, like still able to disclose and show everybody what it's actually like. But I know a lot of people like will try hate playing a game or just out of morbid curiosity. Like a lot of people, for example, bought Gollum you know, because they were just so curious. Could it be that bad? But then there's other games like Concord where people don't like it and aren't interested, and they're just genuinely not interested. At least with Gollum, it was bad, but people were interested. You know, people are like a morbid curiosity. With something like Concord, they just like legitimately don't give a crap. They just genuinely don't understand, don't care. He took my thing.